Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror in detail. Today, we're going to share Yeti encounter horror stories. First story, my Himalayan expedition to find the Yeti. A few years ago, I got a job doing camera work for a Discovery special on the Yeti. That special never aired, and here I am breaking my NDA to say why, because I think these events need to be made known. I'm a professional photographer and cameraman by trade, specifically nature photography, but a gig is a gig. I knew a friend from college who worked for Discovery, filming for some of their extreme nature shows. You know, like Bear Grylls, surviving shows, or those ones that follow a reporter into some cool Egyptian tomb. I was doing mostly wedding photography at the time, but always wanted to do something like my friend was doing for Discovery. As luck would have it, he became seriously ill right before he was scheduled to fly out to Kathmandu, the capital of Nepal, for a new TV special on the Yeti. He put in my name, and they offered me his job. I happily accepted. I was too excited, a free trip to Nepal and a real TV gig. The farthest I've been from the States was Italy for a wedding. I got all my stuff together and drove down to LA to meet my sick friend. I lived in Seattle at the time. He let me use his equipment, and I was very grateful to him for getting me the job. Don't sweat it. Have fun over there, and make sure you listen to what they want you to do. You'll be going into some pretty rough terrain. It's hard work, so stay hydrated. The physical part was no problem for me. I walked a lot, and also liked to run marathons. I thanked him again and took off for the airport. The plane ride was long, really long, but otherwise uneventful. I mainly needed a nap as my back was killing me from the seats and the jet lag on top. At the airport, I met the others in the crew. There was one other cameraman, Willie, who knew my friend from back home. Then there was the show's host, an Aussie named Rob, and Rob's assistant producer, Karen. I have to tell you guys, as soon as I got out of the airport, I felt like I walked into a wall of pollution. The city Kathmandu is huge, dense, smelly, and noisy. Nepal borders India, so if you've ever been there or seen places like Delhi on TV, Nepal is not much different. Willie, who is also Filipino and blended in better with the locals, hailed us a cab. We all went to a Western hotel. Karen informed me that she would be staying at the hotel, and we would be meeting a local guide she arranged for us. The rest of the day, I mainly walked around near the hotel, ate some local food, took some photos with my own camera. Me and Karen were the only ones still awake at this point. I still felt wired despite being exhausted from the flight, so we walked down a bit to a nearby square we heard some music coming from. There was about 20 or so people there crowded around this Nepalese man who was dancing in a circle while some other men played drums and an instrument I couldn't name. It was some sort of flute. The dancer was wearing a golden silk gown and a papier-mâché mask. The mask was interesting, as it looked like what you'd see during Chinese New Year. Painted bright red, with intricate yellow and green patterns surrounding orb-like white eyes and two long fangs that slanted outward from the mouth hole. The mask also had long, bright red hair that covered the dancer's head entirely, so all you saw was the mask and his body. Karen was able to speak a bit of Nepali, and gesturing to the dance, she asked one of the drummers what the mask was. He looked confused at her poor Nepali for a moment, then laughed, and simply said, "Laki." Later at the hotel, I Googled, on the brutally slow internet, what a Laki was, and apparently it's some sort of demon from Nepalese folklore that protects townspeople. I shut off my laptop and then managed to get a nice long sleep. The next day, we met our guide Sherpa, Harish. He was from a village about 8 hours northeast of Kathmandu, going up into the Himalayas. We put our equipment into a rented truck, and then up we drove through the city, then the poor slum/suburbs beyond before finally mountainous farmland. Rob got Willie to film him interviewing Harish for a bit as he drove. Harish told us he had seen glimpses of the Yeti as a boy, and the beast left footprints in the sand near rivers and streams. Many of the villages near him had reported sightings too, but often some kids go looking in their own, he says, but mostly they get lost out in the dense mountains jungle. Sometimes they will come back with scratches and bruises, usually from falling, tripping, or even sometimes bites from snakes. Harish continued explaining that the local legends of the Yeti became world famous when Western explorers began coming to Nepal for exploration, mainly around the early 20th century. The myths exploded as more mountaineers came hoping to see a glimpse of the Bigfoot cousin on their climb up the various mountains, the most famous obviously being Mt. Everest. Harish claims the Yeti exists, but understands why many Westerners, and even those from the cities, are more skeptical, because there are other great apes like orangutans in the jungle which people could think is the Yeti. We stopped filming and let Harish drive. It takes us almost all day, and it was not a pleasant ride. Most of the roads were little more than dirt paths, and some spots were very high up, overlooking gorges with nothing but flimsy aluminum barriers to protect your vehicle if it careened off the road. We reached his village at about 9 p.m. local time. I was expecting some wooden hut village like you saw on TV, but this village was more like a small town. They had power, concrete buildings, and a few paved, albeit poorly, streets. Most of the buildings, though, were shanty huts, with aluminum ceilings and wood or old concrete as walls. Harish took us to the only hotel in town, which was a simple 2-story motel. We agreed to meet early in the morning, around 5 a.m., since Harish said that was the best time to potentially get a sighting. The hotel room was what you would expect from the third world: a bare-bones mattress that was right on the ground, a hole in the ground with a plastic cover for a toilet, and a hose with nozzle for a shower. Luckily, the motel restaurant served some decent chicken. I managed to get a few hours of sleep, but slept in my clothes as the nights got very cold that high up in the Himalayan foothills. I woke up and met the crew bright and early. Harish drove us a bit away from the village, but not too far as we'd have to go the rest of the way on foot. He said most sightings are near a stream that runs at the bottom of a gorge. However, the Nepal government was building a dam just north of the village, and most of the river was dried up, so we could walk along the sandy banks. The river was not far from the road, maybe 15 minutes walk through the jungle. I could see what the dam was doing to the gorge. The water was confined to a small stream in the middle of what must have once been a great river. On either side, as Harish said, were sandy banks and rocks. Me and Willie began filming at this point, and we began trekking north. In either side of the gorge were steep tree-covered hills, and you could see in the distance the first mountains of the Himalayas. Every so often we would stop, and Harish would explain to Rob a bit more about the Yeti, and Rob would relay his own opinions as well. Harish would point out various animal tracks, including bears and even a tiger, so we had reference for when he showed us the real Yeti footprint up ahead. We trekked on for what felt like an hour, following the dried-up riverbank. My friend back home was certainly right about it being tough terrain. I consider myself pretty fit, but even this was getting tough as we kept going uphill. Eventually we hit a turn in the river marked to my right by a steep cliff face. Harish beckoned us over to show some sort of ape-like footprint in the dried river sand. I kept filming as Rob asked some questions about how the villagers found it. Could just be a regular ape/orangutan, that sort of thing. The footprint was pretty odd, though, even if it was an orangutan. It was about the size of a bear's, but definitely humanoid/apish in shape, with 4 toes and a larger opposable toe. We took photos of the print and then used the opportunity to have a lunch break. The footprint was weird but interesting, I thought at the time. Looking back, this is where I wish we had stopped. After lunch, Harish told us that the Yeti is probably an undiscovered ancestor or relative to apes. He says it likes to live in caves and has evidence. The cave mention was given to Karen, who told Rob weeks ago, so it was no surprise to Rob. These nature productions are all generally scheduled well in advance with guides, so there are no surprises. We packed our stuff and began to hike up into the jungle towards this cave, up the steep terrain near the cliffside. When I thought the hike up the river was tough, I hadn't experienced a real hike yet. Back home, I would hike around Seattle and near Portland when I would visit my parents, but trails cannot compare to walking through unexplored Himalayan jungle bush. Not to mention, I had 60-odd pounds of a /V equipment on my back. The jungle is certainly a unique place, though, You were introduced to a whole new soundscape from monkeys yelling at each other, tons of different birds, the rustling of vegetation, and even some weird chirps from insects I couldn't even name to you. Eventually, the constant uphill battle took a turn south, literally. Harish led us downhill until we were standing face to face with this cave. It had a low ceiling, maybe 5 feet, but was quite wide, about the length of a city bus. The entrance was covered in thick bush, except a cutaway hole, where presumably this Yeti entered and exited. At the moment Willie began to film Rob and Harish entering the cave, a shrill shriek came from behind the area we hiked up. I nearly fell over and my muscles went stiff. Instinctively, I swung my camera around, but couldn't locate where the shriek had come from. Rob turned, with a look of concern. Willie and Harish, on the other hand, were grinning at me. Willie had his camera pointed into the treetops and was holding back a laugh to keep his camera steady. "Look up there," Willie said, pointing up. I followed his gaze to see a small brown monkey hanging from a branch. "Howling monkey. Haha, looks like you saw a ghost, nah?" The anxiety in me slowly let down as the monkey screamed again right at us a couple more times before taking off into the treetops. I must have met out the biggest sigh of my life, and we turned to go into the cave. Rob interviewed Harish again before entering. Harish said some local boys found this place, and they saw the Yeti leaving the cave. Rob made a little joke, and then we went in the cave. As you would expect, the cave was pitch black. Good thing we had lights on our cameras in addition to night vision. The cave didn't seem to go that far back, but it was difficult to tell. The ceiling seemed to get lower and lower as you went in. Rob was walking sort of backgrounds, talking to the camera as he spoke about the history of the Yeti sightings, that sort of thing. We started having to duck our heads as the ceiling kept getting lower and light from the entrance grew smaller. We were maybe 30 yards in. Rob was talking. The first Western sighting of the Yeti was in 1832 when he stopped as his foot hit something. He mumbled and turned to see how big the rock was to move around it. Only when he turned and shined his head light on the ground, his foot had not hit a rock. I could see trough my camera, a humanoid mass on the ground, like someone in the fetal position. "What? It is a man," Willie exclaimed. Rob jumped back, and Harish went to go see what was wrong. He turned the man over, who was completely naked and covered in filth. Harish looked up at me. The man was clearly a Westerner. He had a shaggy beard, was very skinny, and looked extremely dehydrated. He was still alive, though, mumbling something and holding himself. There were 2 small holes in the side of the man's, like some sort of bite. A bat, maybe? We were in a cave, and the man had clearly been here for some time. We thought he was a lost tourist or mountaineer at first, but then Harish picked up a piece of plastic near the man and held it up to me. I read it out loud. "Jacques Richard, ingénieur." Rob replied, "Ingénieur, French for engineer. He must work at the dam." Harish agreed, explained that the dam was partially funded by the French government and the World Bank. We agreed he must have gotten lost and went to help him up when the same shriek from the howler monkey emerged from the cave entrance. I turned, slowly, keeping my camera rolling. Through the lenses, I saw a very tall, dark, lanky figure standing in the cave entrance. It had no clothing, no fur, just a huge head of hair that was completely dark like the rest of its silhouette. I could make out the monkey's squirming body in the creature's mouth. It screamed again. Then there was a crunch and a sick slurping noise. All I could make out from the silhouette were 2 enormous, beady, white eyes staring at my camera. Second story. Something very wrong in the Smoky Mountains. My fiancée and I went for a 3-day trip to Gatlinburg, and we've spent our days in the mountains hiking and spending time in and around the national park. Tonight at around midnight, trying to get all the time in the mountains we can, we decide to take an hour drive from our hotel room up the mountain to an overview/lookout type of spot, right on top of said mountain, to see if we can catch an awesome look at the stars because there's a lot of lights in Gatlinburg at night. Driving up there, neither of us noticed literally anything off other than that the mountain winds are a little spooky at night from FL, so it's just unfamiliar But as soon as we get to where we were going and she and I got out of my car, I'm almost overwhelmed with just a vile oppressive feeling outside with me. But not wanting to make the lady uncomfortable, I don't react to much just yet. The wind is absolutely roaring, and unfortunately we couldn't see any stars due to cloud cover. So I tell her I'm going to step to the side and pee, and then we can get back to the hotel room. As soon as I get like 10 feet away, I get a very strange feeling of extreme vulnerability and detachment from everything around me. Almost as though I'm miles away from the nearest person, though obviously I'm feet away from my fiancée. I turned around and walked back to the car and heard something off to my right and instinctively looked over to see something roughly human size go down to coyote size and kind of just hop over a rail from about 200, maybe more feet away. I quickly get back to the car and usher my fiancée and still not trying to scare her, or at least show her I'm scared, but she asked if I was all right, and my reaction was a dead giveaway. We jumped in and sped off. Never in my life have I had an experience like this, and never in my life have I really had a reason to be made uncomfortable of just being outside, but I truly believe something was in those woods with us tonight. Third story, the mysterious life of a cryptid hunter. Now, before I explain my profession, let me tell the truth. There are monsters in the world, and they're almost all out for your blood. Luckily, there are people to keep them at bay. I am one of those people. Now, I'm long retired for 15 years, but I've seen my fair share of blood, guts, demonic possession, and things with more teeth than normal. So, I'm here to give you an idea of the shit I've encountered. Okay, let's start with the basics. My dad was a cryptid hunter. The top of his class, actually. He has probably seen way more than I have. He specialized in long-range type missions, many of which occurred in forested areas. But he also tackled some more close-range, for lack of a better word, missions. He's killed things from ancient werewolves worshipped by Indians to the mighty Mothman of Point Pleasant. He's tough, but the things he couldn't kill were known as specialized cases. These were monsters that had brains or hadn't done anything wrong at that point, or monsters that the government just wanted them to be kept alive for one reason or another. One of these cases was a girl named Emily, but we'll get to her later. For now, let's talk about my stories of woe. My name is Tom. I'm 36. I was chosen for this job because of my connection with the military, combined with my dad's friends knowing me. I was in. But questionable hiring aside, my first case was simple. A chupacabra had been killing sheep and attacked a farmer. We were worried that it might develop a taste for human flesh. So they sent me to a ranch in the middle of nowhere, Mexico. Now, chupacabra are a bitch to catch, but they're a walk in the park compared to some other cryptids. It required a weird cycle of putting out half-rotted sheep meat and waiting. I repeated this for days, but finally it came. I first saw it sniffing the fly-covered sheep meat, and I readied my sniper rifle. Just as I was about to pull the trigger, it saw me and leaped almost directly on top of me. It had at least jumped a good 20 feet forwards and 10 feet high. It clawed my arm up, but I grabbed my trench knife and sunk it into the beast's left shoulder. It recoiled and roared in agony. Less of a roar, more of a human scream mixed with a cougar. I drew a shotgun out from a backpack I carried and blew its head off. I got up, wrapped my bloody arm in bandages, and loaded the corpse into my car and drove away. When I got back, it was discovered that other hunters had caught another cryptid, a girl named Emily. Emily looked, for what I could tell, completely human, but she had something that was up with her. Despite looking 8 years old max, black long hair, brown eyes, she could solve math problems near instantly, like I'm talking 7-digit number multiplication in at most 2 seconds. She talked like she was in a professional meeting with the president of a U.S. She appeared to have no feelings besides hatred. I was tasked with guarding the interviewer in her cell. The conversation goes as followed. Interviewer: Good evening, Emily. Emily: Good evening, sir. Interviewer: Need anything before we continue? Emily: No, sir. I'm fine. Interviewer: What do you feel right now? What do you see? Emily looks around room. I see everything. I see the fear in your eyes. I see the clock ticking to 10:50 p.m. And I see the evil in him. Points at me. Interviewer: Okay, what do you feel? Emily, must I really answer that when I've taken thousands of lives because of it? This girl had killed over 2,000 people before her capture, and I was in the same room with this monster. But she still looked completely human when I noticed her eyes. Her eyes weren't normal. They seemed to look normal 1 second, but then expanded into nothing but a black void the other second. Eyes of hatred, eyes of a desire to kill everyone and everything. Then she grew. She went from an 8-year-old to my age, 21, in an instant. My grip on my handgun tightened. Emily, sir, please step out of the room. I don't want to hurt someone like you. Interviewer, wait, don't leave. His plea was silenced when Emily lunged from her seat. She drew a small knife from one of her boots she was wearing and plunged it into the man's eye socket. He screamed, and I fired my gun. It hit her point blank in the side, but she shook it off. I bolted out of there, shutting the door and securing the 3 locks on the door, and alerted the guards. My boss came. He said that because of how dangerous Emily is, they can't risk any more people. So they left the man there and gave me my next mission. My next mission was to find a cryptid known only as codename Pale. Codename Pale is a 10-foot pale being with no defining features on its face, save a big bloodshot eye in the center. Its agenda is mostly unknown, and what is known is classified information. But what differs it from other cryptids is that it has the uncanny ability to read the minds of its victims, understand the human mind, and even learn sign language apparently when it escaped. So I get in my car, find the coordinates of where it was last spotted this time, being somewhere in Arizona, and haul ass to that spot. Was still there sitting on a tree stump, waiting. I snuck through the bushes, loaded my shotgun, and took aim. I know you want to kill me, Tom. I know you're there. Come out of your spot. The voice, oh God, the voice. It sounded like a man speaking through a microphone. It echoed when there was no possible way for it to echo. I spoke. Me. You know that I'm here to kill you? Pale. You pick up hints when you're sitting on a tree stump, enjoying the Arizona night. Then someone in a loud ass truck hauling ass up the hill towards you gets out with a shotgun and hides in the bushes. He was joking around. He knew where on the map he was. He knew what cars and guns are. He could swear. This Pale was no ordinary cryptid. He knew his way. He understood the concept of human interaction. I questioned him. Me. How did you understand that you were going to die and joke about it all while staring death in the face? Pale. My friend, you're not death. Me. But you're going to die by my hand. Doesn't that make me death in this situation? Pale. Neither of us are death. Death is its own thing. Think of death as a disease that slowly eats away at your life. You can either spread it or keep it for yourself. Either way, you and I are going to die. Those who are affected by death are not death itself. Me. But you can die. Death spreads death. The Grim Reaper spreads death and therefore is death. If the act of spreading death makes you death, I am death. Pale. Those who are affected by death are not death itself. Me. Sorry, Pale. This talk was fun, but I gotta kill you. Pale. Very well. This entity was quite the Aristotle. I took aim and shot him in the chest. Pale went down. I got him and drove him back to my headquarters, and was given my next mission the next week. The mission was to find a Bigfoot. Yes, a Bigfoot. Not the Bigfoot that killed at least 200 people in a forest in Canada. I flew there, and after a week, found my perfect spot near a big-ass cave near where the sightings were most frequent. I waited days, surviving off of granola bars and water. But I saw him walk out of the cave on a Tuesday afternoon. I was munching on my 50th granola bar that day. He noticed me in the bushes. The last thing I saw before bolting for better cover was a good 500-pound boulder barreling towards me. I basically jumped from my spot into a thicket of trees and began running. You would believe that he was at least somewhat affected by the trees, and to that, I envy you. As I was dodging trees and getting ripped up by thorn bushes, he was smashing through the trees, enduring crotch shots that would make even my dad weep in pain. I spun around quickly and fired a shot with my sniper rifle. It sliced through his left shoulder, drawing blood. But he slammed me into the side with his long monkey arms. I crashed through at least 20 feet worth of trees. I slammed into the ground with a sickening crunch as my ribs cracked. By the time I was up, he was running at me again. I knew that I can't outrun him. I drew my knife and rushed him, sinking it into his side. He roared in rage and agony. I put my sniper rifle to his head and fired. The beast fell. He was 8 feet tall, so when he fell, he rumbled the ground a bit. Like always, I packed him into the car and drove away. After I got in my boss, I got a strange request from the guards that guard the cells that contained the specialized cases. It was a note from Emily. She said how she wanted me moved to that guard duty. Naturally, it was sent right to me before anything bad happened. I walked to Emily's cell. She greeted me with a hello, and I repeated the greeting. She asked so that I was in the room with her, heavily guarded, of course. She spoke. Emily, you know how I said you're evil? Me. The only evil person evil here is you. Emily, cold, direct, and correct. I'm impressed. Me. Why did you bring me here? Emily, quite simple. I brought you here so that I can show you one of my abilities other than shape-shifting. Me, trying to break the tension. Is it a monster's way of flirting? Emily, negative. I'm here to say that I have more abilities. All of a sudden, one of the guards' heads explodes out of nowhere. Me, Jesus Christ. What the hell was that? Emily, it was not my doing. Look, I turned around and saw a horrifying sight. The guard had been shot. Soldiers were raiding the area. Me, what? He's dead. What do we do? Other guard dies. Emily, I suggest that we make a run for it. Even though I can hold my own, I don't want a person like you to die. Me, okay, but stay the clothes. I don't want you to go around killing people. So here I was, sneaking my way through a monster prison with a girl that killed almost 2,000 people right behind me, all while military personnel are raiding the building. This couldn't get any worse, can it? Well, as it goes, it did. We were in the second wing of the building, only one wing away from the exit, when a Mothman jumped me. It bit down hard on my shoulder, causing me to shriek in pain. I drew my knife and shoved the blade into its torso. It screamed and got off me before crashing through a glass cell holding a goat man, which proceeded to charge out of instinct straight into Emily's path. Before I could speak, the goat man, or what was left of him, was splat against the wall. Emily stood there, holding a nearby pair of scissors. It took me a while to realize that what was splat against the wall was its brain. Emily had gutted the poor bastard like a fish and had enough time to perform extreme brain surgery. I got up. Nice job, I said. After that, we booked it to the exit. Now, came the hard part, what to do with Emily. She didn't seem like the cold monster she was in the facility. She was glad, happy even, to be in the outside world, yet 5 seconds ago, she gutted a goat man faster than a ninja in an anime can slice something midair. When I questioned her about it later, she said that she was the last surviving subject of a failed attempt to make a super soldier. Think a soldier with the highest rank in military, experience with guns, knows almost every form of martial arts, and with the speed and agility of a meatied-up chipmunk. Now multiply that by 100, give them shape-shifting abilities, and you get close to Emily's capabilities. Turns out, she means well, has an IQ of almost 200, and can tell if someone asking her questions is a spy. She had been hunted down by the military since she escaped the facility at 8 years old. And the high-ass kill count. All military personnel. The monster hunters had to capture her so that the public won't find out about her backstory. Pretty cool. Also, she was cool with the facility keeping her, although she said it could get a bit stuffy, all in that cold, matter-of-fact tone. Cut to 2 months later, me, Emily, and my best friend turned monster hunter Josh were in the Alaskan wilderness, tracking down a Yeti. And before you ask, yes, there's a difference between a Bigfoot and a Yeti. For starters, a Yeti is much taller. Like Bigfoot can only be 8 feet tall. However, there are reports of Yetis becoming a staggering 26 feet in height. So needless to say, we asked for some heavy-duty tools. The next difference is their behavior. While Bigfoot only attack when provoked or their territory is invaded, Yetis could wipe out entire villages without even waking up on the wrong side of their rock bed. So, we were tracking this thing down in the snow. I was scouting out the area when Josh asked, "Josh, so Tom, how's Emily?" Me, just as murderous as always. Josh, being the shit-talking douche he is. "I've been seeing you two," exchange glances. Me, "Remember, Josh, you're not the one here with the high-powered sniper rifle." Josh, "Oh, come on, man. It was just a prank." Me, also knowing how Josh loves pranks that cause a lot of damage. "You said that when you egged my car." Josh, "I'll fucking do it again." Our banter was cut short via a roar so loud it seemed to rumble the ground beneath our feet, followed by a tree hurling towards us like a wooden torpedo. I heard Emily scream, "Get down," as it crashed into the ground, nearly connecting with my head. Then silence. I sat up and looked through the scope of my rifle. I saw the Yeti crashing through the trees, making a beeline for us. I fired a shot, which whistled through the air and hit the beast in the kneecap. It roared in pain, but kept its pace. We slid down into a frozen creek and kept low. Josh was breathing heavily, but kept his cool, somehow. I was keeping a straight face, something I'm really good at. Hell, the other hunters gave me the nickname Poker Face for that reason. Emily was same, but less relaxed than me. She was gripping her shotgun tightly. I held my breath. The monster was right where we wanted it. I hesitated. The Yeti was sniffing around, getting increasingly closer to our position. It grabbed Josh, swung him into a tree. The crack of Josh hitting the tree is in my mind forever. Emily shot him in the chest, ran up to the rock, jumped from it, and nailed the 19-foot behemoth in the head with a well-placed tornado kick. But it slammed her into the ground. I fired again. It sliced through the side of his neck. He saw where the bullet came from and nearly pulverized me with his hand. I rolled out of the way just in time, but he backhanded me into a tree. The sickening feeling of my ribs cracking almost made me throw up. The Yeti walked up, picked me up by my head, and sat. The beast could crack my skull like an overripe blueberry. I stopped moving, body frozen in fear. When Josh fished out the Molotov cocktails in his pack and tossed one onto the Yeti, it went up in flames, screaming. It dropped me into the creek, breaking the ice, causing my poor back to come into contact with freezing water and the rocky bottom of the creek at the same time. The monster crashed to the ground, a burning turd of what was once a Yeti. Still wallowing in pain, I opened my eyes to see Emily. She was staring at me, pale. "Are you okay, Tom?" she said. I nearly jumped if it wasn't from the pain. She had asked a question with genuine concern for my safety. This is not the Emily I once knew. I just sat there looking. "What? Are you in too much pain to speak?" she said. I snapped back to reality and said, "No, I'm just surprised you just asked me that." But deep down, her question confused me, not for the actual question itself, but how she said it. After informing my boss about the situation, he said that I should get well soon, a pretty mundane type of response. But knowing my boss and his love for underlying meanings, I pressured him about it. He said this, "Boss, there's another cryptid in Alaska." Me, "Is it another Yeti?" "Boss, no, it's something way worse." Me, "Okay, like how worse?" "Boss, it's a Wendigo." "A Wendigo? In Alaska?" The perfect bitch slap of fate to ruin my day. If you didn't know, Wendigos are some of the most deadly cryptids out there. They're fast, mean, and don't go down without a fight. How do I know this? My dad was tasked with killing a baby version of these bastards. Only about 6 feet tall, 3 times smaller than an adult, and it almost killed him. He was able to give it a lethal dose of cyanide. Via the Wendigo killers, Wendigos eat almost anything, so it would eat a bottle filled with weird liquid by shoving it in its mouth and pumping 3 slugs into the beast's brain. And that was only the baby. Okay, so it turns out that there wasn't just us hunting this thing down. 3 other people were sent to go with us to hunt this thing. We were in a military S-car, driving through the forest of Alaska on the outskirts of a small village. I was riding shotgun, a hunter named Mike was driving, Emily and Josh were in the second row of seats, and two other hunters, two males, Jaden and Bob, were riding in third row. Mike, you know what a Wendigo looks like? Me? I've seen him in the manual. Mike, don't worry, you'll know deer-like head, very thin, roughly 6 meters, very scruffy fur that hangs from its body. Emily, sounds a lot like a skinwalker. Mike, yeah, they're pretty similar. But a skinwalker is a calm, calculating hunter with an attitude, as well as shape-shifting abilities that evolve from corrupted shamans. A Wendigo is a cannibalistic, savage beast with an attitude that evolves from some twat eating human flesh. It was about 10 o'clock at night. We were driving at a normal pace when Mike stopped. Hey, why did the car stop? Said Josh. Mike slowly pointed in front of him. We all looked and froze with him. There seemed to be what looked like a mangled deer carcass sitting straight up. One issue, however, it was too big to be a deer. Slowly, it rose up from its crouching position, its arms hung low to its knees. Its fur was snarled and scruffy. Its horns were caked with blood, along with the beast's snout, hands, and at its feet. We had just interrupted a Wendigo midway through his snack. The person was still moaning and occasionally convulsing on the ground. The Wendigo's eyes adjusted to the light, and a wide, toothy smile slowly came upon its face. It licked its lips. It got ready to pounce. Just as the Wendigo was about to jump onto the car, Mike gunned it, slamming straight into the beast's body. The Wendigo rolled over the car, its bones creating a stomach-turning, squeaking noise as it did. We left it in the dust, supposedly. 5 seconds later, it was bounding towards the car, roaring. I stuck my head out of the window and fired my assault rifle. Several rounds tore through the beast's skin, but it just screeched and continued bounding after us. Josh dropped one of his cocktails, lighting up the ground behind us. The Wendigo leaped over the 12-foot-high flames and was able to slash the back tire of our car. Me? Okay, this isn't part of the plan, right? Mike, no, it is not. Jaden, I got a double-action shotgun. It could do some damage. Mike, right. What do we need you to do to be able to hit it? Jaden, I got to get close. Emily, I can help with that. Mike, what can SHE do that we can't? Me, you'll be surprised, Mike. Mike, okay, fine. Just get this damn thing off my tail. Jaden leaned out of the car. I readied my assault rifle for another barrage of bullets to be sent the Wendigo's way. Emily drew a barbed-wired whip. I watched with wide eyes as Emily snagged the Wendigo's right leg. It fell and got dragged. Still roaring and slashing, the Wendigo batted Emily off. Emily got tangled in the barb and almost fell on top of the monster. I grabbed a part of the whip. My hand got snagged on the barb. I bared through the pain and pulled Emily and the Wendigo closer to the truck. Jaden took aim, but out of nowhere, the Wendigo slashed another tire. The truck spun out and crashed. I remember waking up. I crawled out of the mangle of metal that was once a truck. I dragged Josh, Mike, Jaden, and Bob out, one missing Emily. I got to her. Her torso was cut up by the barbs. Her breathing was labored, and she was bleeding. I got her out, when all of a sudden, the Wendigo jumped out. Jaden pumped a slug into its left eye socket, destroying most of its head. It roared in pain, but batted Jaden away. Mike shot it in the stomach with his revolver. It once again batted him away. Bob shot it with his crossbow, but he got slashed away. While we were in bad shape, the Wendigo was dying. Its breathing was fast and shallow. Its body was riddled with burns, gunshot wounds, and arrows. Finally, it dropped, its breathing becoming even more fast and labored. Josh grabbed one of his Molotov cocktails and shoved it into his mouth. The beast gulped and exploded. Its chest burst from the pressure and flames. It screamed, but its screams were different, sounding more human than normal. After watching the light show that was that, I went to care for Emily. I gently unwrapped the barb, bandaged her up, and made sure she drank some water. The Wendigo was still breathing, but it was fading. We all gathered round and watched this monster. To think that this was once a human was chilling. A person resorting to the most extreme and desperate measures in order to survive. Mike handed me his revolver. I nodded. I knew what to do. I limped up to the heaving beast, just barely clinging on to life, and put a bullet in its head. But as its eyes slowly closed shut, I saw its eyes shift from rage to confusion to realization to panic to denial. Every single human emotion in its most raw and desperate form flashed through its eyes, something I've always ignored because I was too busy thinking about the rush killing these things gave me. And finally, its eyes turned into acceptance, then blank. In the final moments of its life, the Wendigo had found out that it was going to die, felt every emotion from anger to guilt about all the people it killed, and died accepting that it was going to die a monster in the eyes of everyone it ever knew and loved. And to be that desperate to accept and come to a conclusion like that, I couldn't handle it. I burst into tears, sobbing, screaming. I dropped to my knees. This monster found peace at the final moments of its life and knew full well that it was the last time it would ever feel those feelings. I started crying even harder. Everyone else wasn't doing very well either. They had all picked up on the signals about the poor Wendigo. Jaden was in shock. Bob was in a similar state. Josh was crying with me. But the worst was Mike's and Emily's expressions. Mike, a 65-year-old battle-hardened hunter, had tears running down his face. But Emily, same age as me, she was the worst to look at. While everyone else wasn't trying to hide their emotions, Emily was trying her absolute hardest. She was nearly choking from her attempts to hold in her sadness. But it broke into these guttural, painful sobs. Emily, the coldest person I know, was crying along with everyone else. But something inside her changed that night, as if she knew all the pain she caused. She walked up and hugged me tightly. "Everything will be all right," she said, and she kissed my forehead. By the time I had really come to realize what happened, I was still sobbing. But I got up, walked Emily with everyone else to the mangled thing that was supposed to be a car, and questioned her about it on our way back. "Me, why did you kiss me?" "Emily, well, my entire life was filled with hatred. I hated everyone and everything. But when you got me out of the facility instead of leaving me alone, something clicked. I knew what it was like to love. Jaden, Mike, and Bob. AWWWWWWWWWWWWW. Josh, amidst the awing, called it. Cut forward to now, Emily and I are happily married. Josh is a chemist. Mike is a happy, healthy 80-year-old coot and lives in a nursing home. Me and Emily occasionally visit. Jaden is my age and is an engineer. Bob is about 11 years older than me, and he's an IT. Emily is a therapist for a big company, and I'm a zoologist studying species of animals. Things are going great. I hope you enjoyed my story. But I gotta go. I gotta feed my cat. Fourth story. Something strange is happening at a camp in the North Woods. Okay, so I have to write this quickly since I only got my phone back for the first time in 2 weeks. I only have the length of laundry to tell it. See, I work at a language immersion camp, specifically German. They hired me because I'm a native speaker. I'm from Munich and want to be a teacher. This is great resume padding for those university breaks. Basically, it is just a fancy youth camp with a high staff-to-kid ratio. The academic work comes from doing it all in German. Everyone lives in traditional style buildings. There's a large town square. The dining hall resembles a traditional German restaurant, and the shop and cafe take euros. But to enforce immersion, there are customs on arrival. We're the ones that have to crack down on the kids. Then the dean cracks down on us. All luggage is searched. We're unplugged. The camp philosophy is some hippie idea that kids learn better in nature without modern distractions. No cell phones, just one landline in the dean's office, a few computers set to run in German to make videos and work on advanced concepts. No American food, music, or even clothing slogans. That's why I don't have video of this. I can only tell you what happened and hope you believe me. This is in the North Woods, very remote. The nearest town is 30 miles away. It's just perfect for letting the camp make its own little world here. Kids come for 1 to 6 weeks. Counselors are here most of the summer. The only time off is when the kids are asleep, the hour of rest time, and the trips to town every 2 weeks to do laundry. Everyone also uses that time to catch up on their phones, of course. We're otherwise a completely closed community. Because of this isolation and the need for skills, it pays very well. I still try to prove, somehow, what is happening in the woods. I always fall asleep to the sound of the wind through the pine trees, like an ocean, like they're moving. My suspicions first began when I saw the tree root working its way through the flower bed at the edge of the cafe terrace. Hadn't we planted at least 6 feet from the tree line to avoid mixing native and non-native species? Yet now, the trees were almost on top of them. I shook my head. Clearly, I hadn't had enough sleep lately, and I was imagining things. Or maybe the flowers spread. They do that, don't they? Over the next days, the other counselors and I kept seeing toppled or broken trees, some completely removed from their roots. We joked about a Yeti or something. Until last night. After getting the kids into bed, 3 of us, Peter, Jan, and I decided to go back to the fire pit by the lake and watch the stars. It was already well dark when Jan got the idea. Have you ever really seen the dark, absent city light pollution? It's so absolute. But a sliver of dying silver moon was out, lighting the way down the steep path to the lake. I delayed going down for a few minutes to stop at the communal tap. Yes, we have running water here, but all of the water for washing and such at every building except the kitchen uses recycled gray water. All drinking water comes out of this tap, and fill my water bottle. One gets used to the iron taste after the first week or so. I had just headed back toward the fire and was about 50 meters down the path when Peter and Jan came whipping around the corner, screaming and shaking all over. I could hardly calm them down. All I got at first was Der Wald let, Die Boom, in hysterical tones. The woods are alive. The forest. Maybe I have watched too many crime dramas, but I wanted to be sure of what they saw. So I took them both to the dining hall for a cup of tea, put Jan downstairs at a table, and Peter in the upstairs multipurpose room. Then I asked them to write down what happened and gave them each some butcher paper I nabbed from the kitchen and pens. They both rode a tree, chased us up the path. Suddenly, the miles of woods seemed so sinister. I just ran back to my cabin and went to sleep. The next morning dawned hot and beautiful. I almost forgot about last night, thinking it was perhaps a dream or that Peter and Jan had hallucinated or something. The stifling dark and the isolation here can lead to a lot of scary stories and mythos. However, I had the papers where they had each separately written down what had happened. There was no denying that. Still, the days must go on, and I had kids to take care of. I didn't tell any campers. It's policy to basically cut them off from the world while they're here, and I didn't want to scare them. The afternoon grew scorching, so I took some of the kids swimming. The swimming area is right by the fire pit we had intended to use. I tried to put it all out of my mind. They were all running full tilt down the steep path, but then from Katia, the girl who had run ahead the farthest, I heard a loud thump and a scream. Of course, I ran towards her and helped mop up her bloody nose. But I could hardly keep my mind on task. There was an enormous tree in the middle of the path now, and I could see a perfectly shaped hole where its roots had been. This was no creeping movement. The path seemed much narrower now, too. We had to go down at single file. Wasn't it a good 6 feet wide before? My laundry is almost done. I have to go. I have another month up here. 5th story. The Yeti of the Mammakus. One of the best things about New Zealand is that there is no animal in the bush that can hurt you, so you're meant to tramp around the forest at night all you want and not get mauled. Anyway, 2 of my mates decide to go spotlighting for deer in the Mamaku forest near Rotorua. They are avid hunters, been hunting since like 10 years old at least. It's a bit of a drive, and they lock the forest gate at night, so the plan was to camp in the forest. The locals occasionally take their unwanted dogs up there, tie them up along the side of the road, and shoot them, which is spooky to me. That's why I'm mentioning it. I think people also drop dead animals off the side of the road, as a pig dump to get the wild pigs to come to the road to feed, gives the pig dogs some tracks to follow. Anyway, they had been hunting, didn't get anything, were parked up along the road and decided to hit the hay set up a tent, or whatever to sleep in. Before they got to sleep, however, they started to hear this horrible noise from some kind of animal, like a growling slash rasping slash bellowing noise, calling out from the darkness of the bush every couple of seconds. The kind of noise it made was something neither of them had ever heard before in the bush, and sometimes these guys walk for days to hunting spots or get dropped in by chopper to remote areas, so they have spent many, many nights in the bush. It wasn't even during the roar, mating season when the deer roar. They lay there trying to figure out what kind of animal it was, and the noise got louder and closer. It dawned on them that the noise being made could not be from a deer or a pig or even a human, because the noise was so loud slash strange that the lungs driving the noise had to be larger than any animal they could think of that would be in the bush. They could hardly even describe slash recreate the noise. It was so strange. At this point, they were starting to get freaked out. They loaded the gun back up and decided to see if they could find the source of the noise. They started to track towards it, one person holding the gun, the other with the spotlight. Unfortunately, the bush toward the noise was too thick, which cut down their visibility to like 5, maybe 10 meters. This would obviously present a tactical disadvantage if the thing decided to charge them through the bush. So they ended up tracking back through the bush to road. The noise still didn't stop, so they were like this and slept in the car with the gun loaded. I think eventually the noise stopped and they were able to get some sleep, got up in the morning, and came home. To this day, they have been unable to think of any animal in NZ that could produce such a noise. Sixth story. Yeti. I was hardly known as being a particularly brave man. So you could imagine my surprise when my master, who I was currently working under for a fair amount of wage, stood up from his black leather couch and announced to the whole room, "Grab your things, Charles. We shall be embarking upon an expedition." Just following a rather aged documentary about Mount Everest and the local legends of a terrible beast, the Yeti, which wandered the mountain. Erwin Baker had always had a fascination with the unknown, and as his valet, I was inclined to listen to his frequent ramblings of the occult and supernatural, and occasionally even partake in the occasional ritual that he claimed would grant immortality or some other fanciful enhancement. Perhaps it was because he was so rich that life just didn't hold its element of surprise as much any longer, and this was just one of his many attempts to stave off boredom. Either way, I do not claim to know, and soon we had traveled from London to Rome, and from Rome to Turkey, and finally the long journey from Turkey to Nepal. Nepal was a very cold place, might I say. The air was thin, and the locals were more than happy to relieve us of a few pounds in exchange for supplies for our rather impromptu expedition. We had gathered a team of a rough and ready sort, and our guide, who went by the name of Lawrence Fisher, had vexed me from the very beginning. He bore a greasy black handlebar mustache and a head of similar colored hair, and carried himself as if he was a prince. My master and I must have shared the same loathing, but he had claimed to have made it to the top and down 5 different times. Lawrence also claimed to have made arrangements, and after staying in Nepal for a night, we began our trip to the base of the great mountain via a bus. My master was a little upset at its condition, as it was rusty and worn, and rattled us every time we encountered a slight bump in the road, but he managed to at least prevent other passengers from coming aboard and mucking up the trip more than it already was. The trip to the mountain lasted 2 long days, and as I stared blankly out the window and into the hilly surroundings, I couldn't help but feel some apprehension about going on such a journey. Of course, I didn't really believe that Yetis existed, and all the different rituals my master had made me do had all ended in failure. But even so, these lands had a sort of mysticism about them, something distinctly unknown. We arrived at the base of the mountain at about noon, and when we pulled up to a small lake by the name of Imja, we saw an old run-down shack beside it. Lawrence led the group to the shack, and inside the foul-smelling place was this crusty old man who communicated only in sign language. Lawrence translated the various signs to something like footsteps on the middle, look for caves. I thought my master would be upset at such vague news, But to my surprise, he gave the man a thankful nod and said, "Gentlemen, we have our course." Everyone present shared my surprise as he walked off back to the parked bus, but a few mumbles and shrugs were exchanged, and from there we moved on. Yet another 3 hours later, we reached a different part of the mountain, and the bus drove away this time. "Lead the way, Mr. Fisher," spoke my master with a cheerful voice, and we were on our way up. At this point, the air was dry, but not as cold as you may imagine. Sure, it was quite frigid, but with all the coats and layers we wore, the weather was quite bearable. I suppose the best thing I could say of our expedition was the beautiful surroundings, with massive valleys of green and incredible views of the nearby landscape. The mountain loomed overhead farther than I could see, and the snow underneath our feet was crunchy. After about a day of travel, we made camp at the flattest piece of ground we could find. Camping on Mount Everest was a painful affair, considering the bitter cold bit into you at night the further up you went. But we all made it through and continued to follow Lawrence the next morn. It was about 2:30, according to my watch, when Lawrence stopped dead in his tracks about 50 feet ahead and with a jubilant expression turned to us and began shouting, "We are on the trail, my friends. Look!" When my master and I approached where he was standing, and were both equally shocked by the outline of what appeared to be an oversized foot in the ground. Irwin looked more overjoyed, whilst I must have appeared quite horrified by what was before me. All these years, I imagined that the pictures of footsteps upon slopes of Everest had all been staged, but the frightening reality of what was before me hit harder than I imagined. Even so, I kept my best poker face and couldn't help but grin a little at just how enthusiastic my master appeared. Usually, past the twinkle in his eyes, one could see a hint of boredom within them. It was gone now, and I thought that was a good thing, to be quite honest. The people who were with us just stood there, most with expressions of disbelief. One rubbed his eyes, while another raised a hand to his mouth. There was a little hesitation within the men as we pressed on, following the scattered prints in a hope to find where they led. "Looks to be a snowstorm in the making," Lawrence announced, picking up his pace. "We must find our Yeti before it sets in." How he knew this, I do not know, but he stomped up the snowy slopes at double time, and my master and I followed suit. There was a childish spark of adventure in me that evened out with the initial shock of seeing the mark in the snow. Perhaps I am just a weird person at heart, but Irwin's pure enthusiasm was contagious. Another night went by, and the prints were beginning to grow more and more discernible. At first, the outline was very faint, but as we continued our progress up the mountain, the marks were clearer. 3 huge, toe-shaped extremities and a giant main section. Simple enough, but nonetheless frightening. A couple men had snapped some photographs of the prints we had found, as my master demanded, and we had even taken an old Polaroid along, just to make sure none of the evidence would be lost. It was another day of travel, and things were beginning to get much colder. The air was starting to become more thin, but we still pressed on. Flurries were falling from the slightly darkened sky now as we walked, but were hardly enough to cover up the trail of footprints. That night, when we made camp, a boy named Inoki, who was a native of the region, approached me in my tent with a very serious expression on his youthful face. "Why does your master wish to find the Yeti?" he asked. "Mr. Irwin is a man of variety," I replied in a proud manner. "He wishes to be the first to find the Yeti and prove it exists." Inoki just stared at me blankly for a while. "I did not think that we would find Yeti. I will be leaving tomorrow. You should do the same." And with those ominous lines, he ducked out of my tent and left me there to ponder. The next morning, he was nowhere to be found, and a little of our supplies had gone missing. My master didn't hold it against him, bless his soul, and acted as though nothing ever happened. A few rumors flew around here and there about why Inoki had left, but soon the rest of us forgot about him and were on our way again. Today was the day we found where the footprints led to. It was just 8 in the morning when we stumbled across the gaping maw of a cave in the distance. Sure enough, the prints went right to it. We had all gathered at the entrance, and stared into the murky abyss with apprehension. Even Lawrence didn't have his usual confident look on his face anymore. The atmosphere was silent and awkward for a time before I spoke up. It was something completely uncharacteristic of me, I know, but my curiosity about what was inside the cave had piqued my interest. I shall go in first. Everyone looked to me and nodded in a grateful way, including my master, who also appeared a little proud. For a time, I just swung my arms and cleared my throat in preparation, looking around at the expectant stares around me as I took a step forward. "I'll be going in now," I restated, slowly taking a few steps forward and letting the darkness of the cave engulf me. Thankfully, we were equipped with heavy-duty flashlights for just such a circumstance, and as I entered, I turned mine on. The whole cave lit up in a brilliant pale as I progressed through it. There wasn't the usual dripping of water one would expect to hear within a cave, considering any water was probably frozen in these conditions. The tunnel snaked around a bit, forcing me through a section of left and right turns in a very rigid manner. While the walls were actually considerably close to each other, the ceiling was almost higher than I could see upwards. The cave continued on a little further before terminating in one giant cavern ahead. The ceiling was far closer to the ground here, but for some odd reason, whitish-blue ice had crept into the walls and ceiling until it all but covered the whole area. It was quite strange, I thought, considering I had seen no such thing within the tunnel area. Even stranger, there was no need for my light here, because the roof of the cave had a jagged hole within it that let the light of the sun cascade through the ice formations nearby. Hundreds of miniature icicles hung from the intact part of the roof. But what took my breath away was the sight of half a skeleton hanging upside down with the skull and bones of its upper body scattered haphazardly on the freezing floor below. I put my hand to my mouth, and now it was not only the cold that sent a chill down my spine. Bloody bones belonging to all kinds of various different creatures were littered all across the place. But what disturbed me most was how many of them were human. Some were hard to distinguish, because they lay in messy piles with other bones of different creatures, but the ones in plain sight were enough to let me know that we had most certainly found our Yeti. My heart nearly stopped as my eyes slowly looked over the rest of the cave, but to my immense relief, the beast must not have been home at the moment. I almost couldn't bring myself to snap a Polaroid before I left, but had managed to do so in the end. When I showed the image to the group outside, everyone seemed just as frightened as I had been. That included my master, who, with an unsavory look upon his face, said, "Gentlemen, I believe we have what we came for. It is time to depart," and in a most timely fashion. Not one man raised a protest of any sort, and soon we began descending the slope of the great mountain once again. I suppose when he saw that picture, Irwin knew just what he was getting himself and his group into, and the risks outweighed the rewards. We, like many others, had gathered what little information we could and would not be pushing our luck. But I'm afraid that my tale doesn't end there, for as we stomped our way down the mountain at a reasonable rate, we were engulfed within a blizzard that descended upon us in what felt like a few minutes. The whole world was cloaked in a powdery white, and soon I had to struggle in order to see 5 feet in front of me. I made it a priority to stay by my master all the way, who plodded onwards with his gloves batting the air ahead in an attempt to aid his vision. "Well, Lawrence did warn us," I shouted, trying to stay as positive as possible. "Indeed he did, but not of how fast it would happen," came the reply, and to be honest, I couldn't refute this. It had been about an hour of incessant walking, and I was sure we must have lost some men by this point. I could see none of the nearby surroundings, only an endless amount of snow and a barren wasteland beneath my feet, which I was beginning to have trouble feeling. Just as I thought things could not possibly get worse, through the unbearable howling of the wind, a terrible cacophony of roars filled the air. The noise was so loud that the ground underneath our very feet shook as if it was about to give way, and I found myself falling face first into the snow. The frozen liquid stung my already chilled flesh, but I rose back to my feet in order to join my master once again. The scream sounded unearthly. It is hard to describe, but I would liken it to the sound of 1,000 lions roaring at once mixed with the cries of 100 children. It was terrifying, to say the least, and despite the weather, my master and I began running faster than ever. We became fueled by adrenaline as something from behind us slowly began growing more and more noticeable. It was a rhythmic rumble that shook the ground like the roar, but to a lesser extent. But it sounded suspicious, frightening in a primitive way, as if a man had grown 3 stories tall and was sprinting towards us. From what little I can recall of this, my theory must not have been far off, because we heard a horrible scream from behind that momentarily pierced the veil of wind before fading into the frozen oblivion for good. With pure fear to spur us on, we began almost stumbling down the mountain. That thing must not have been far behind, but the reason I believe we are still alive today is because our team bought the 2 of us time. After what felt like hours, the storm was beginning to let up. Enough for me to see the figure of Lawrence Fisher lagging slightly behind us, and occasionally glancing back into the storm in fear. The only memory I have of the beast itself is the massive, hairy arm that momentarily reached out from the cloak of snow to grab the entirety of his torso and drag him, screaming at the top of his lungs for help, into the ocean of murky white. Irwin and I didn't stop running until we were away from the storm, and even then were sure to behave as if paranoid. And after 3 days of no sleep and exhausting travel, we managed to stumble down off that godforsaken mountain and back to the closest thing to civilization that was nearby. Besides my master and I, only one man made it off that mountain alive. And it was the boy Inoki who we actually ended up meeting on the way down. He had been traveling at a much slower pace, you see, and was more than happy to share the food he had taken with us. Water wasn't exactly much of a problem, though, as you may imagine. The 3 of us made our way back to the village after we exchanged our horrifying tale, and after thanking the boy, we booked a flight back to Turkey. I am currently recording our story in this country, and make of it what you will, but please, if you value your life at all, do not visit Mount Everest. Something lurks there, amongst its frozen slopes, waiting and hunting its prey, something that is truly horrifying. Thanks a lot for watching this video till the end. Drop your suggestions in the comment section.